here is fiction. Science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Salutations, Cognonauts. This is Exofathom, and it's Friday night. My name's Ayla, and I will be your host for today. I am joined by my two lovely co-hosts, as always, Mike and Nick. How are you guys doing?
Hey, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. I'm doing all right.
Happy Friday.
You know
Very
me, I'm
cool.
hanging in there. How you doing?
Doing good. We are recording out of Southern California, where we've had some hailstorms this week. Pretty crazy. You got some hail too, right, Mike?
I got hit in the head.
Oh no!
I was like walking to get a coffee, and like, what the hell hit me? And then I look up. I'm like, oh, that's hail. Let me go or something. And then
See, that's terrible. You're outside.
It's fine. I survived.
Was it coming down forcefully though? Because it sounded like machine guns when it hit our house.
Yeah, at first it was like kind of soft, and I was hoping it would be snow, but then I saw it like bounce off of cars, and then it just got like the sky just opened up and was angry.
Oh no!
But I was getting coffee because the world revolves around me.
Of course.
So I wanted some coffee, and the sky was like, no. It just opened up its artillery assault on me. But it was okay.
At least you can say in the future to all the young kids that you were in the great hailstorm of 23.
Oh no!
5 long minutes.
Makes it sound cool.
It made me want to say hail, hell.
Well, I was just thinking too, you could have got a cup of hot espresso and then just kept your lid open and collect all the little ice balls and have like a once in a lifetime ice, like a hail iced espresso.
No, it's LA hell. That's the first hell of the year. That's acid.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. Well, yeah, and with all this crazy weather that we've been having, I noticed a lot of the meteorologists saying, southwest wind or northbound this, and it got me thinking about directions. So that's tonight's episode, and I know it's probably like directions. I'm not going to listen to this, but if you've listened this far, buckle up because we're just going to look through directions and the number of directions and the meanings across cultures, and then talk a little bit about why it is that we need to orient ourselves in space and time if physicists are saying space and time might be illusory. So yeah, my first question to both of my co-hosts, without looking it up, do you know which way north is right now?
I used to when we lived up near where Mike is, because it's actually laid out very intuitively. But since we're on a peninsula now, no, I have no idea which direction north is. I don't even know which way the beach is, if I'm being honest.
Oh no, that's bad. That's bad.
Yeah. Just look out your window. Don't you have beachfront property?
I wish. No, actually, I don't wish.
Not with all that ocean rising, right?
Yeah.
Right. We might have lakefront property pretty soon if that river near us keeps rising with all the water.
Yeah, I got lakefront property.
Nice. Well, and do you know where north is, Mike?
Yeah, but I'm not going to tell you. Then I'm going to get doxxed. There's going to be like a knock at my door.
Right. Well, I ask because the concept of the 4 directions or cardinal directions is a common theme in many cultures around the world, believed to have originated from the observation of the natural world, particularly the movement of sun and stars. Now, we don't really get sun and star. Well, we get the sun, but we don't really get stars in the city. And in our case, our stars are usually street names. So when we did live in the West Side, I remember when my dad was helping me learn how to drive, he said, know where Pico and Olympic are because they run in specific directions. So I would always orient across those main streets. And Nick, we are on the peninsula, but I know a main street that goes to the beach. And my first thought was right to that to know which way north would be. So I'm a streets gal, but do you guys do streets? Do you use your
Yeah,
phone,
but
landmarkers?
again, we live in a place where everything was on trolleys before, so that doesn't run north, south, east, west like Los Angeles does. It all has like southeast, northwest, like they're all diagonal directions.
But you had to reorient at some point because you don't get
No.
lost very frequently.
Yeah, in my bubble, I'm fine. But yeah, if I'm trying to go, that's why every time we go to the beach, I'm like, you have to tell me where I'm going because I have no clue.
Wow. Okay. So you're just sort of like floating around in space. You don't have like that grounding. Interesting. Now, would you say that you could, if you had, like, if I wasn't around and you didn't have a phone, would you have no way of knowing which way to get to the beach, or would you rely on some other tool?
I mean, past experience, probably I would try to remember the directionality, but no. I mean, I guess I could chase the setting sun.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I'm like, oh yeah, the sun goes this way.
Just make sure you know that it's setting and not rising.
Right.
Yeah.
There's another layer of complexity. I don't know about this, guys.
I love it. Well, and so for being Navajo, I know we grew up with the concept of there being just the main 4 directions: north, south, west, and east. And as I was working on this episode, I was just thinking about some of the stuff that I grew up with. Like, for some reason, north was sort of like the bad direction. Like like east is the best direction. That's where the sun rises. Most homes, the hogans the door points to the east. If you pray, you point to the east. And then when you have like your wrap up prayer, you would say a certain phrase 4 times at the end to signify each of the 4 directions. And in Navajo land, there's 4 sacred mountains that border the reservation. And so, I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, well, when everything orients with those 4 mountains, it makes sense that you would have 4 directions. But that's not always the case. There's other cultures that might have 8 directions or 12. And I'm just curious, like, do you guys have any suspicions about why some cultures would choose more directions than others, or benefits to that, or why 4, why 6? Why don't we?
Well, we have 8 in the compass, right?
That's
because
true.
there's a midpoint between the 4. So I guess you could just keep dividing that into more complex directions.
But I don't know if you would call that like the cardinal set of directions. I think in our culture there's like north, south, east, west, that's your cardinal set, and then you add northeast. Southwest, whatever you want to add on to the other 4 to kind of help be more specific.
We forget center.
Ooh, yeah, there could, yeah, and Wiccans, they recognize a 5th, direction or corner.
What if you just what if you go straight up?
Yes, that would be center.
Oh, okay. Excellent name for it. The y-axis is much better.
Yeah, you got to go Y for about 2 miles.
Then you travel X for about 4, and then
southeast.
Yeah, you just like throwing them all together.
Well, right, and it's funny because like north, south, west, east. Assuming I know which direction is which, and the person telling me a direction knows which is which. It's pretty easy. But for me, if you were to start saying southeast, southwest, northeast, that would just throw me off so hard. And so, Nick, you were talking about like the other different levels or degrees. And yeah, like on a compass, you could have 15 degrees due east or 20 degrees due north. And so it's really funny because to me, on the one hand, adding that complexity gives greater accuracy. but it also muddles it so much more. Like for me, it would muddle it, but for someone else, it would be like, oh, I'm spot on. I know exactly which way to go. And I don't know. I just started thinking more about the concept of orientation, the way we talk about it. It's central to the person and it's less central to the like locality and the features, if that makes any sense. Like, you know how some people have talked about when you're giving directions, some people will use landmarks, other people use street names. There's like different ways to communicate that. And I'm just curious if you guys have any sort of thoughts about that, just in the sense of the differentiation of landmarks or,
Yeah.
clues.
I'm the worst at giving directions. If a stranger asks me for directions, I will purposely lead them the wrong way, just the opposite direction completely, just to let them know that I shouldn't trust every human all the time.
Wow.
And then I'll use a unit circle instead of directionality. So I'll be like, yeah, you got to go pi over 6 blocks that way, and then you take a 3 pi over 4 the other way, and then eventually, once you pass the Denny's, it's about you got to turn pi and you'll be there.
Oh my God. Then rotate 6 times, then go backwards 2 times, and then rotate 15 degrees, and you'll be pointing directly at.
It's all about the angle of the dangle. And it can't be obtuse.
Ah. All right. Well, there's Mike's take. Nicholas.
So what are you asking?
When you give directions, do you do it by like landmarks or by streets?
Oh yeah.
Or do you do it by cardinality?
Good question. Yeah, I don't do it by cardinal direction because most people don't know. If they're lost, that's not going to help them. But yeah, it would depend on the level of knowledge the person who is asking, right? Because if they don't know what street you're talking about when you say go down to X street, well, they don't know where X street is. It sometimes is easier to use landmarks. Hey, when you see the Winchell's Donuts, make a left. But even that has also its drawbacks too, because there could be 2 Winchell's Donuts in the span of your trek, and you don't know which one to turn at.
That's so true. Or you could say it's 4 blocks or 3 street lights, right?
Right.
And you could mix that up.
Right.
I'm so bad at the street lights.
Yeah.
I'll do
go 4 streetlights down. I mean, there's like 6 of them, and you're like, wait a minute.
You only think about the major streetlights. You're not thinking about like the little streets.
Yeah,
exactly. And then what's hilarious to me is that there's a place in our brain that's cataloging the number of streetlights from one point to another point. Like that's the thing that I thought about while I was working on this. I was like, goodness, I know exactly how many streetlights there are from my house to Vaughn's. That's like. It's just there. It's just accessible. And that's a little weird to me. Is that weird to you? Is that just me?
No, it's directional navigation. I mean, you got to be able to remember where your grocery store is. So.
But the number of street lights?
There's a lot of, you get into like Briggs-Meyer personality testing and personality psychology in general. It gets interesting because certain personalities will define directions in certain ways and define like some will be landmarks, some will be street names, and some will be like mileage. I forget if it's mileage or not. I think they're like gateways. I forget like the Briggs-Meyer works for it. But the thing you're talking about ends up defining different types of people. Which is
I love that. Yeah, no, for sure. And hold on to that because we're going to talk a little bit about we'll circle back to that. It's not in my notes, but I really do like that. And I feel like it's going to come up later on or maybe sooner. We'll see. But just to orient the conversation, let's start with the good old Greeks. This was originally just going to be a little short episode on the anemoi, which are basically the wind gods of Greek mythology. So northwest, southeast. For the north, and what I thought was really interesting is that they all have these little characteristics to them that have subtle meanings about the way that the directions influenced us and generated sort of these perceptions we have about directions. So in the north, we have Boreas, or I don't know why I'm thinking of David Boreanaz from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think that's how you say it, Boreas. And he's known as the cold north wind and the bringer of winter. So that's the north, which is funny because the Navajos don't like the north. Maybe it's cold. I'm not sure. And also, too, that wind would only be cold depending on where you were oriented on the globe. So some cultures might not like the north winds because it's cold, but others it wouldn't be cold. So they might not mind, or maybe it's always cold. I'm not really sure, but anyway, his artistic interpretation, he's usually depicted as a striding winged god. Striding, I think, just means buff, because when I was looking at all the art, they were just all these like really buff wind gods. Sometimes he had like long hair and he had a beard, but they were like spiked with ice because he was so cold. And other times you would see him depicted as that like that face with the big cheeks, and it's
On
like
maps.
on maps. And he's a gust blowing. It's a gust blowing head with bloated cheeks, and he's up in the clouds. You see it in the maps. And let's see. And then the name Boreas comes from the Greek word for north wind, which can be defined as meaning to devour. So I thought that kind of maybe leans to some of the veracity that's in the depictions of him. But that's the north wind god. Nick, you want to add anything to that? I know you're a mythology fan.
No, keep going, because I think you're going to get to a larger idea
Okay.
once you name all of these. So.
Okay, cool. So next we have the west god, Zephyrus. And he would be the west wind and the messenger of spring. Artistic interpretations also showed him as a winged god, but usually he would have a lover with him. And there was like a story about him and like all this romantic entanglement. So that's probably why all the pots have him with the lady. And he was supposed to be the gentlest of the winds and the messenger of spring. So that makes sense too, right? Like you've got portrayals of sex and fertility. Spring is associated with crops and all this good stuff. And the gentle wind, right? Like what would you expect of a soft lover guy, right?
I don't. I'm kind of confused why they flip it in that respect, but keep going.
Right. Yeah. Because we'll keep going.
Yeah, we
to
can
that.
get there.
It was also thought that Zephyrus lived in a cave in Thrace. That's neither here nor there. Thrace. Okay. Oh, and then the lover bit. So he was reported as having several wives in different stories, and was said to be the husband of Iris, who's goddess of the rainbow, which is kind of cool. I mean, right? Because a rainbow usually does, from appearance sake, go left to right, which would look like west to east. And what's that? Oh, he'll be back. Okay. So I thought that was kind of interesting that there was the recognition of the origin of the rainbow. Moving on to the south god, that's Notus. And Notus is god of the south wind or the marine tropical air mass, also a winged god. And in his depictions, he was often carrying a little pot and had ankle bracelets. I don't know what the ankle bracelets were about, but unlike the other winged gods, he had these little anklets. Notus was rarely considered to be as beneficial as Boreas or Zephyrus. And this was because the coming of Notus was associated with the hot, wet, and stormy winds of the late summers, the winds that would often easily destroy unharvested crops. Makes sense. You wouldn't really like that. And then finally, we have the Eastern god, Eris. Is that how you would say it, Nick? Eurus?
Yeah. Eris.
And god of the east wind, or rather the southeast wind, which brings oppressive warmth and rain and severe thunderstorms. Also a winged god, and this one also carries a pot, which makes sense because of the rain. But Eurus's symbol is an inverted vase, spilling the water and symbolizing the rain. So as opposed to Notus, where the pot's, upright and it's containing it, Eurus, it's dumped out and it's going everywhere and oppressive and severe severe thunderstorms. So first off, those are the four Greek gods, and I just wanted to point out how much I loved this concept of sort of giving the different directions a vibe and connecting them with seasons and connecting them with the way that those seasons feel.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that that was what I was going to comment on is that do directions have qualities, and I think that we're answering that right now. What strikes me as interesting is that they switch. The Greeks have it backwards with Zephyrus and Eros, um, because you would think that the eastern wind would be the symbol of spring and renewal, as it's tied with the rising sun. And the western wind, as it's tied with the setting sun, would be associated with fall.
Mhm.
But I'm not exactly sure why they changed that up. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, north does elicit an idea of cold,
The North
and
Pole.
yeah, and
Yeah.
east, I would think of east as more of like the rising sun, west is the setting sun, and then south is more of the heat and tropical.
Mhm.
Maybe that's just through all of the mythology that we get, that I would have those ideas. But it reminds me of that. It was in the Rudolph commercial, or not the Rudolph. Was it Rudolph? Maybe with the heat miser, and
I don't remember. Well, keep going. Maybe
there
it'll.
was the I forget. There were the guys that were the hot guy and the cold guy in the little claymation show. But it kind of reminds me a little bit of that. You get that dichotomy of like Father Winter, and then like the summer and all of that stuff.
Oh, Mr. Heat Miser.
Yeah,
Oh,
hip miser.
Mr. Gold. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's in my head. I had a childhood once.
Right.
Yeah, I wonder though too. The Greeks being very seafaring folk, if it has anything to do with the way that the winds played with the ocean, and not so much the sun, or played with the seas around them.
Mm.
Because I think the Pacific Ocean was known as the calm ocean, and the Atlantic is more kind of has a violent vibe to it, which east and west, at least from a pure America point of view, that's kind of what we think. I think that's proper.
Yeah, I
it is.
set foot in the Atlantic Ocean. I didn't like it. It was very unwelcoming. I like my Pacific Ocean.
And I think Pacific even means like passive or like chill or one of those
Mhm.
sorts of connotations to it.
Mm.
So yeah, I think we would have to pull up like wind maps over the most traveled trade routes and sea routes, and then maybe pull from that because this also goes. I'm actually interested if Ayla will hit it. I haven't looked through all the notes. Yeah, no, that's what I thought about it.
I know, no, same. At one point, I thought, ooh, let's pull up some like what is it? Not topography, but like meteorological reports of these different locations and compare them. Obviously, they are going to be a little bit different. I didn't get that far, but this could be a series depending on how interesting this episode gets. So stay tuned. We might have a thrilling wind map episode.
Oh, I would love that. You want to hear a secret?
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a little secret. Whenever I fly, I like break out the weather maps. I break out the wind maps. I chart paths that I think the pilot should go.
Oh my word!
Where the susceptible, where the where I think there will be turbulence.
You're like tracking the jet stream, right?
Oh
right.
Yeah, I'm like, is there a tailwind? Is there a headwind? Are we gonna get some crosswind? Like landing on the East Coast in certain airports, you get like if there's gusts that's coming crosswind, it's like shear wind. It sucks landing. It's not even like you get seasick. It's just the plane feels like it's just gonna fall out of the sky.
Wait. Are you mapping that while in the air? So you're doing like real time, it feels like kind of stuff?
I do it before, and then you can pull up formulas for like velocity and stuff like that. So in the air, you'll have a little position where it's at. But of course, the pilots and the airline crew do well of not letting anybody know you're going to hit a storm or anything until you actually hit a storm.
True.
So then you also have to track the storms and where you think it's going to go, because winds and all that stuff can change. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm doing that stuff before, during, and then especially like right before we land. Like once you hit descent, like 45 minutes to an hour, half hour depending.
Mhm.
Um, that's when I'll do like final calculations. Be like, oh, this is the second most dangerous part of the leg or the trip. So
That's amazing.
I hope our pilots know what they're doing.
Well, yeah, I wasn't expecting the first time I took an international flight over the Atlantic. I wasn't expecting the little screen on the headrest in front of me that has a little picture of the map, and you can see the plane. And I didn't. I didn't. I'm not a person who's scared of flying, but I will say that when the little plane was right dead in the middle of the ocean, I felt so much dis-ease that I think I watched, like, Beverly Hills Chihuahua, which was, like, the only friendly video option at the time, and, I happily watched it because I didn't wanna think about the fact that, like, we were in the middle of such vastness with all the wind. So I mean, I get the want to sort of map that out and have some control over it because that's a little
Um,
scary.
yeah, the illusion of control. I'm gonna
Mhm.
try the opposite next time I go over the ocean. I'm just gonna download a bunch of plane crash videos on my phone
Oh,
and
no.
just marathon them as I'm flying over
Oh
the
my
ocean.
god. I hope you give your seat neighbor like $100. Just be like, "Don't look this direction."
No, no, look at this
That's
plane crash. Look where it broke. Look at that fuselage. Look at the front. Why do you want to fly first class?
oh
I'm gonna try to
goodness.
fly first class and like get everyone real anxious to leave so that I
Nice.
can have all of first class to myself.
Oh, no. Oh, man. That's like when I watched Final Destination a whole bunch of times before one flight, and then I got on there and I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that."
Final Destination. I saw it as a kid. I was like, never getting on a plane.
Yeah,
Never
it was
ever getting on
scary.
a plane.
Well, it's funny, talking about the illusion of control and such. We could move on next to the Wiccan perspective. Now, no disses against the Wiccans. For me, I'm not 100% on board, but I can see it being viewed as a way to sort of feel like you're a little bit more in control of things. Maybe, maybe
Kayla,
not.
it's not the 1600s. It's okay. We're not gonna
Well,
burn you.
no, 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 no.
Yeah,
No, I was trying to be clever in my segue, and then I was like, "Oh, I hope I don't offend any Wiccans out there." But,
Wiccans are good people.
yeah, oh, yeah, little comment, I'm sorry, but, I'm gonna move
Well,
on.
you're not offending it.
Okay,
I'll
okay.
offend everybody. Okay,
Okay, good, good,
it's my
good.
job.
Nice. So for the Wiccans, they've got they instead of the 4, they actually have 5, which makes sense. You've got the star with the 5 points. And for them, they get into the elemental symbology of the different directions, which is kind of cool. So for the northern direction, they associate that with Earth. Sorry, I don't know. Mouth's weird. Which is fertility, wealth, abundance, strength, and wisdom. And then you've got the West, which is affiliated with water, healing, expression, peace, compassion. You've got South, which is fire, passion, inspiration, intuition, creativity, protection. Then you have the East, which is intuition. Oh, I'm sorry, air, which is intuition, knowledge, change, and renewal. And then they have this 5th element for spirit, the soul, or the divine mystery. And I think it's kind of interesting. It doesn't really line up with the cardinal directions, except for maybe like fire, right? Because south, you were seeing it associated with like the tropical hot storms, and here they're talking about fire. Do you guys see any other similarities between the different directions, or any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's 5 directions. So the 4 cardinal directions and then center. So, like, I think America is one of the few countries that doesn't consider center as a direction as well. Um, so that would make sense that the 5th direction would be spirit, which kind of is a representation of the center, right? Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess east and air would make sense to me. Um, yeah.
Yeah, this is one layer that I was interested we're going to hit. Yeah, there's a few other sects of religions that will Abrahamic religions that if you get deep enough into their rituals, they do something very similar by setting it out like this, and I think it's pretty much the same thing. I don't know if north is earth, but I do like kind of classifying the directions with different elements.
Yeah, no, same. And I like sort of like the layers of complexity. And Nick, like you were talking about west and east, I was thinking about, on the which one was it? The two of them that have the pots. Okay, yes. Oh, okay. So
It's south and east.
south and east, yeah. So the east god has the inverted vase, which it's symbolizing all the like letting of water, which kind of like you said, it's like air, right? There's nothing in the pot anymore. It's empty, it's air. Although you would imagine that water would be south. So it's not 100%. And you can scroll down in the notes if you want. I did talk a little bit about the origins of the Wiccan belief set, which was kind of cool because I think, Nick, did you do the Hermetic principles?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So let me see if I can search that. Yeah, okay. So it says in my research, Wicca is a modern pagan religion that was founded in the mid 20th century by Gerald Gardner. Sorry, I don't know. I'm stammering on that. Gardner was heavily influenced by various traditions of folk magic and occultism, including the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which included the use of 4 elements as part of its system of symbolism and magic. And each element is associated with different qualities and correspondences such as direction, color, and symbol. Nick, does it remind you of anything? I hate to put you on the spot, but
Why are you putting me on the spot? I don't like this. No, I'm kidding. We have a comment here from Corey, actually, from good friend of Screen Time Continuum. Corey, how you doing, man?
Hey, Corey.
Good to hear from you. He said there should be 7 directions. Center, then the 6 vectors describing 3-dimensional space: east, west, north, south, up, down, and you.
I like that too. Okay. So nice. Yeah, well, and thank you for that. There's a lot of disagreement I've seen on the internets. I've seen some people with the 5, some with the 6. I like the 7 though. Or wait. Yeah, I like the 7 a lot more. But then Nick, were you going to add anything about the Hermetic sort of origins?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything of note to add as far as the qualia of directions go. Again, I'm not really heavily versed in all of that stuff. So, but it would seem to me that it would be heavily reliant on, like we've kind of been talking about, where you are on Earth. And the geography surrounding you. So like Mike was alluding to, if your west is the Atlantic Ocean, there might be a colder front coming from the west because that's a very cold ocean. If you're in Greece in the east, then you have like the Middle East and sort of, Italy and, the Middle East area. So you might get a little bit of warmth. So yeah, directionality is very subjective. And I think that's why the center or the U is also a factor in all of that. Also, I wanted to make a note, and I'm sure you might be bringing this up there too, but north is only north for right now, and it hasn't been north like this always. North changes.
Oh, I love
it.
That's going to be like a metal show. It's going to be insane.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you imagine the equator right now is the North Pole, like.
Well, maybe
interesting times finally.
Yes.
Well, and I guess I'll give a little bit of a preview of some of the concepts for later in the episode. But one of the things I wanted to bring up was the vestibular system. So in our brains, the vestibular system is responsible for sensing motion, balance, and spatial orientation. And it's closely linked to our sense of direction and spatial awareness. And maybe some factoids to keep in your back pocket as we go through some of these other directional theories and ideas and myths. So research has shown that it plays a really crucial role in our ability to navigate and orient ourselves in space. For example, studies have shown that individuals with vestibular disorders, which affect the function of the inner ear and the vestibular system, often experience difficulties with spatial orientation and navigation, such as getting lost or disoriented in unfamiliar environments. Other studies have explored the role of the vestibular system in spatial memory and navigation, suggesting that our sense of balance and motion can play a crucial role in our ability to form mental maps and navigate our surroundings. So I'm sure you've all heard of that taxi cab driver brain scan versus another human's brain scan. And those systems, light up more if you do that all day.
Yeah.
What's that?
May I hop in there?
Yeah.
Jumping real quick. Yeah. In really dense cities, you'll find that certain parts of the brain will actually be overdeveloped. So taxi drivers in London have overdeveloped prefrontal cortex. I forget the map. Maybe it's the vitriol system.
Vitriol system. Vestibular.
Something wrong with his vertebral system.
Yeah, the verbal system. When you get an overdeveloped verbal system, and then you'll be able to map out cities. Yeah, but it is really interesting though when you get like drivers, once you kind of navigate through those tight packed cities where you end up learning all the roads, you do it over and over and over again. Sometimes we do better than GPS systems in finding fastest routes. Mm-hmm. And that is from a computer scientist point of view. There has been decades of research. I mean, there are some of the most famous people, like Dijkstra, is just one name I'll throw out there, have been known for finding routes, like shortest routes, and through using different algorithms. And I think it is trying to put in language what our brain can intuitively do if we leave ourselves to be kind of more natural and divine. There also used to be there's an implant you can get in your chest. I don't know, but it remagnetizes your body pretty much. And there's an idea that basically once we stop being hunter-gatherers, we start being more civilized and settled, we lost connection with the Earth's magnetic system. And you can get that back with this implant, but once you do it, people say it's like you've developed a whole other sense.
Yeah, they get it implanted in their fingertips. Yeah, it's like a little magnet that you can implant into your fingertips, and it'll help you feel magnetism.
What? That's okay. Yeah. Episode 2. This is a follow-up. We've got the North Pole, and we've got the magnets. I mean, magnets, right? Like they never get old.
How do they work?
Well, yeah, and so this is really.
This one.
What's that?
No, go.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking to myself. You're good. Keep going.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to add this last point that the vestibular system's role in spatial orientation and navigation may provide some insight into the importance of our sense of direction and our connection to the natural world. So this might help explain why many cultures have developed symbolic associations between different directions and elements as a way of orienting themselves in space and connecting with the natural world around them. And Mike, to your point about the computer science angle, that is so fascinating, right? Because, you think about directionality and that's used in navigation. And in computer science, you could have an algorithm that's like 3 pages long and you get a B+ on that. You'd get an A if it was 2 pages long. So it would make sense that you want to sort of define directionality as the shortest distance between 2 points or 2 results or whatnot. And that would somehow harness this natural innate ability that humans have.
Yeah. Then it's not always the shortest. It's the most efficient.
Elegant.
No, it doesn't have to be too elegant, but efficient. And pathfinding is one of those questions that got me into computer science. It's one of those questions in computer science. But so, for example, let's say the shortest point from here to another city involves you flying into a headwind. Right, you end up slowing down your plane, having to use more fuel. That actually might not be the most efficient. It might save you more time, but as far as overall cost for any business and whatnot, it may not even save you the most time either to fly straight over there. But if you could catch a tailwind and take that tailwind all the way there, you use less fuel. Use I hope I'm using that right. Tailwind is when it blows with you, and headwind is when it's blowing against you, I believe.
Sure. I wouldn't know, but I see where you're going with this. Yeah, like there's other elements that would be needing assessment or something like that.
Yeah, and when you find the most efficient path, you have to count into all of that. And that's what some things like A-Star Search, it's called A-Star Pathfinding, tries to do, is try to calculate all of that stuff to find the most efficient path, not always the shortest path.
I love it. I love it. Well, okay, so I can go back to a couple of the myths that are a little bit different than the four directions, or I could go forward and share a little bit more of the preview of like the vestibular system and the ways its conditioning can influence us.
Before we jump into the vitriol system, can I talk about those elements? I'm going to keep going.
Do it.
No. So it's interesting that water is kind of tied in with healing, because during we did an episode on angels, and they're archangels, right? During that research, there are different angels that are tied in with the different elements that are ended up being tied in with different directions. And water does tend to have this healing element to pull something from I think it's the Bible. I get the Bible, the Quran, and the Jewish, not the Old Testament, the Talmud, the older one.
King James?
No, not King James. Talmud, yeah. I get all those mixed up into one because during the research I was doing it all at once. But I believe in the Bible, in the New Testament, yeah. Jesus is healing somebody on the Sabbath and cures them of, I don't know, I forget what it is, but asks him to like put his head in this water. The water heals him. And there's an angel at the bottom of the water. So this ends up being tied to those sort of even Wiccan beliefs, and a lot of Christian belief, like think about Christmas. Jesus wasn't born in December. I think he was born in like April or something, but it ties back to these sort of pagan Wiccan ideas that just became Christianized.
No, I love that.
I don't even know if it necessarily needs to even. I guess you could go back to the Babylonian myth, right? The waters of Tiamat, and like the ancient primordial waters. And then we talk about, in our fungi episode, how fungi crawled out of the water and then terraformed Earth. So you have this idea that water is sort of the creation of life. And so it stands to reason that it would be also healing as well. And then you have the concept of the womb and the amniotic fluid that you float in for 9 months. And all of that being regenerative and restorative.
And if you're a fan of Friday the 13th, don't get Jason in that water. Don't get him in that lake.
He won't die.
Gets deadlier.
Yeah, he heals up and he jumps out of it.
I still say that the practical effects on the first movie are incredible. that scene with the mother at the end. Oh my goodness.
I love that first movie. It's still like, I've seen it so many times, but it still like chills me because I think it's the first person, like I don't know, because like Halloween does it too. But the first person perspective, there's something about that where you just don't know what's behind the camera. It's sort of like, and then you find out it's spoilers for like a fucking 80-year-old movie, but like you still get chills.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the disorienting effect that, a lot of filming, there's a level of disorientation that helps to induce fear in horror films. And I remember I was taking like a drama class somewhere sometime, and the director was insistent that this one scene happen with a person crossing from right to left, because in our culture, when we read, it's left to right. There's a lot of directionality about going from left to right. And so when you disturb that and you go from right to left, it's just a little bit off. The brain sort of recognizes it. And so when you have like a killer character going in that weird direction, then it's just like it helps evoke that level of fear for a lot of audience members.
It's called crossing the line.
Crossing the line.
When
Okay.
you do it with the camera, it's called crossing the line.
I think there's something to be said mythologically too about this disorientation, because two things come to mind. I think of the origin of panic, which is the Greek god Pan playing music and sort of scaring the bejesus out of people in forests so that they lose their way.
Yeah.
And then also I think about, oh shoot, I might have lost it. Disorientation. Oh, Dante's Inferno. So the beginning of the Inferno is Dante losing his way and losing his path, and that ushers in the whole journey that he takes in. So there is this the thrusting into chaos that disorientation puts you into. Sends the psyche towards dark places.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of the Joseph Campbell episode.
Yeah, here's journey. Yeah, there's a time too where that felt like personal. Where I don't know where the hell I was. I was on some island, and I was trying to find out how to get to the beach, a specific beach. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just go west. And I got to the highest point of the island. I looked around and I saw nothing but ocean around me. I was like, oh shit, that's right. I'm on an island.
Right, there's no directions.
Yeah.
Oh, golly, that would be disorienting.
Yeah.
We got a comment from Corey here. It says vortexes swirl clockwise. The top is left to right. That's part of our sense of left to right directionality. Oh, yeah. No, it makes sense. I remember being as a kid too, the concept of the way the water drains in the sink. And in Australia, it goes the other way. And I remember as a kid being like, what? Like, that was such a mind-blowing thing. And yeah, like in ceremony for Navajos, you always go clockwise. And I remember being really little and I had to go to the bathroom because they're all night ceremonies, sometimes 4 days, 10 days. And you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. If you're on one side of the hogan, it's the shortest distance to just go out the door. But no, you'll get yelled at. You have to go all the way around clockwise because it's just like taboo to do it the other way. So we're very aware of also that direction, which I don't know. I mean, like when I think about that, I think about water drains and I think about clocks. But before the invention of clocks,
No, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, before we all had clocks and watches, like the little, circular ones, we had sundials, right? So I'm wondering that again is all sort of this orientation to the recognition of the movement of stars and celestial bodies. We've been observing this circular pattern and we understand that it's like reliable and orienting and soothing and good for us.
And be thankful that our axis spins in sort of like an upright position. It's kind of slightly tilted on Earth, but you think of something like I believe Uranus is poles are on the side of it, and so it's spinning like it's spinning sideways instead of standing upright.
That's weird.
And how would that affect your directionality as well? So you could think about like. It's easy now because we have a North Pole that's sort of like on the top of the Earth. But if our North Pole and South Pole ever shift, then it's going to be a very strange world.
It's a party.
It's a party.
Good time.
Well, I want 2 astronauts, one with that heart implant and one without it, and send them both to Uranus and see if they sense anything differently. That would be kind of cool.
I think that they would die immediately, but sure, we can send them there.
Let's see.
You want to? I guess you just want to murder 2 people.
That's true. Well, apparently it's going to come. Corey's saying that we're going to get gravity locked with the moon at some point, and then we're going to be screwed. Good point. Things to come. Things to look forward to. Well, okay. Speaking of, go ahead.
And 2, here's the as we talk about directions, we talk about circles. We live on a sphere. I think it's like so. For example, and it's spinning really fast. So that polar point or the polar point, the
Axis
your
point.
axis. I was gonna call it an eigenvector. But your axis is bending and changing. You also have to count into that. And start to work in like things, different kinds of math. Sorry, my brain just.
And then when we widen our scope, we'll have to figure out the directionality the Earth is moving in relative to the galaxy and the universe. And then we're going to have lots of directions.
We have all the directions all at once.
Trust. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
But what is beautiful is that your brain always tries to simplify stuff, and it's for our own comfort. But it creates beautiful things, I think.
Yeah, well, and getting back to the vestibular system and neuroscience, I'm going to share just a couple of interesting correlative effects that have been observed as of late. I mean, everything's constantly changing, but thinking about orientation, thinking about the mythologies that different cultures have created based around our ability to orient ourselves in space and time. These are some interesting facts. So new insights into the vestibular system and its role in various aspects of human perception, cognition, and behavior are coming out all the time. There's multisensory integration. So the vestibular system is closely linked to other sensory modalities like vision, proprioception. Proprioception is like close your eyes and lift your hand up into the air. Well, your hand is in the air, but
touch your nose.
Yeah, touch your nose. It where your body parts are. It also recent research has shown that the brain integrates information from these different sensory systems to create a more accurate perception of our surroundings. For example, studies have shown that the vestibular system contributes to the perception of self-motion in virtual reality environments and can enhance our ability to detect visual motion. Now, what's interesting is there's also cognitive processing that happens. The vestibular system is not only involved in sensory processing, but plays a higher role in cognitive processes like attention, memory, and decision-making. Studies have found that vestibular stimulation can enhance cognitive performance, particularly in tasks that require spatial processing and working memory. So if you're a fan of like the Andrew Huberman podcast, he talks a lot about narrowing your focus and widening your focus. If you're really stressed and anxious about something, you can't let it go. Widen the focus, go out for a walk, look out at landscapes. It helps you recalibrate. If you can't focus, if you're having a hard time concentrating, pick a point and stare at it for 5 minutes and it'll help you focus. And these are just really funny studies that they've been finding consistently. And, it's like, that's cool. Yeah.
Or at least if you stare at a point, make sure nobody is in said point.
Oh yeah, don't stare at
a lot of trouble.
Right. And
like, sorry, miss. I'm just recalibrating my vestibular system.
God, that sounds wrong too. And there's only two more. There's emotional processing, which.
No, keep going. You're good.
Okay. Recent research suggests that vestibular stimulation can modulate emotional responses and regulate mood. So, for example, studies have found that vestibular stimulation can actually reduce depression and anxiety. And it's capable of neuroplasticity, meaning it can change and adapt in response to sensory input and environmental cues. So if you do some training, like balance exercises or exposure to motion stimuli, it can induce neuroplastic changes in the brain, improving balance and cognitive performance. So I think this is all really
So is
weird.
sensory deprivation just murdering our vestibular system?
I don't know, but Corey said riding the teacups at the fair cheers you up.
I mean, obviously, it's gonna make you
Seriously.
sick, but
Yeah, you'll
you're
throw
gonna
up and be happy
yeah.
about it.
I don't do it. I don't do it. I stay away from those things.
Nick, you were gonna say something, I think.
Well, no, I actually think that he's, it's a kind of a joke, but the teacups is a very good example of that, right? Because they're all different colors. They're spinning around in a circle. You can't really focus
Exhilarating.
on anything. There's always music playing too.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a very good representation of how you might be able to recalibrate. But I was just wondering, since the vestibular system is so sensory focused, what does sensory deprivation do to it? And are we doing ourselves a service by shutting that down and letting it rest, or
Are you really sense depth though?
huh? I mean, yeah, I guess you're not 100% sensory depth, but
Why does that sound like
you
a
still
t-shirt?
feel. I guess feeling is still something, right? You still feel a little bit.
Well, yeah, but I do think that part of the point of that is to sort of probably hack into the widening of the focus, because if you lay there long enough and you sort of drift, you can start to get the sense of like, well, okay, I'm sort of losing up and down. I'm just in this vessel kind of thing, which, and they say, like, it does make people feel relaxed, so I can see that sort of there's no more narrow focus. It lets your system sort of recalibrate maybe, and that could be relaxing. But what got me thinking was about these scientists, these physicists out there that are saying that, like, what, space isn't locally real and that time is an illusion. But if our vestibular system is about orientation in space and time, then what are we doing? Right? Like, what's going on there?
It's a measure of convenience. It's a measure. Maybe in order for a brain to work, we have to do it.
Yeah, and I think it also, I mean, space and time are locally real. We have seasons. We have markers that we can repeat over and over again, that we use in placement of time, because there wasn't a concept of time. There was a following of the celestial bodies, right? And we've just kind of condensed all that knowledge into what we call time now. So while yes, space is fake, the time is very real here on Earth.
I want a shirt that says I'm locally real.
There you go. I like that.
Love it. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, now, so talking about the perceptions of reality, I'm going to go back to some of the myths. Now, I'm going to ask my co-hosts for a little bit of help here, because I was doing my spin bike before the episode and drinking like gallons of water. So we're on the column row about the feng shui, and it talks a little bit about the Bagua map. Would one of you volunteer to just read those?
Could you give me the XLC5H? Could you give me the coordinates for this?
It's okay.
Page
I got
2, the last row. Okay, I will be right back. Thank you, Nick.
Sure. So we're going to be talking about Feng Shui and Bagua, and how it relates to the directions. Here we have north. So it symbolizes in Feng Shui and Bagua career and life path, and it also symbolizes water. The west symbolizes children and creativity, and it's under the element of metal. The south is fame and reputation, and its element is fire. And the east is health and ancestors, and its element is wood. Again, with all of these elements, I always wonder what that kind of means, because I can like conceptualize the elements and what they may symbolize, but there's like a whole level of magical systems when it comes to these elements. So I find myself kind of perplexed by the whole idea. And
the Bagua. I love saying that.
Bagua.
There's a picture too. If you scroll down to about page 8,
Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
16 pages, Ayla. My God.
There's only one image on page 8, Ayla.
There's 16 pages.
It's okay if
page
there's 16
7.
pages, but
Page
there's only
7.
one picture. You know that
That's
one
the
image on
Bagua,
page 8.
If you're listening, you can Google Bagua and you'll see a hexagonal shape with the yin yang in the middle. And here they do have the north, south, west, east, as well as the middle coordinates, northwest, northeast. So yeah, and it is still kind of a mystery to me. I do want to do a little bit of a episode on the Bagua. Corey here says it's looking like space-time reality is more like localized probabilities. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And confluences that are technically as big as the entire universe and eternal are nevertheless manifested locally in the way we relate to them with our senses as far as we can tell. And viability, again, rather than meta truth, is operative for us. Right, exactly. There's, yeah,
Dropping
like,
some bars, Corey.
yeah, I know. I mean, as far as we're like, we're still in these bodies. So, whatever we're observing, the science, the quantum, the way the particles behave when observed, when not observed, like, it doesn't do much for us here. Like, and that, I think that's a really valid point. There's the Bagua. Thank you. And yeah, and so I just, I love the concept of the different metals. And, I have an acupuncturist I go to, and she does some really cool articles, and a lot of different acupuncturists will have blogs about this kind of stuff. But the way that seasons are associated with different elements, the way that those elements influence our emotions, there's been all this ancient study about this kind of stuff, and it fascinates me, to be truthful.
Yeah, I think with that, could I rotate it?
Yeah.
No, because I'm a boomer. And let's see. Probably not.
Like
flip its orientation. There we go.
Which way? What do you want pointing left?
Just want like a 33-degree turn to the left or something like that.
I screwed it up. It's over.
It's over.
Oh, no, it's over. The show's over. Good night, guys. We're out of here.
My Bagua!
Stop shaking.
So beautiful. Oh, no. Okay, there it is.
I ruined everything. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, what I find interesting is that there tends to be opposites on certain sides, except for Earth.
Mm.
And even Earth within a subdomain is still technically opposite relationship versus education. But no, it's just trying to build accesses on top of it and maybe put like again, going back to that unit circle, just layer on different systems of meaning on top of it, and I think you'll get a better understanding for like why elements tie into directionality, also tie into personality traits, or personal traits.
Yeah. Personal traits, yeah. Zodiac signs as well. Also, Ayla, I saw the Wiccan pentagram, which sort of reminds me of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man in a lot of respects. Yeah,
and I love the triangles in the corners too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the directionality of the Vitruvian Man, I think, also is kind of significant. Especially since, he has the feet that are standing down south, but also the feet that are southeast and southwest.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about why 4, and there were a couple of conjectures, the cardinal directions being one of them being the position of the sun and the stars. But another one was the human body, often being divided into 4 parts: head, arms, legs, and torso. And the division may have influenced the use of the number 4 in various cultural and religious contexts.
Also our seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely 4 is big. And
Lunar
you think
phases.
The lunar phases, you also think about the shape of, each of the directions. You create a cross.
Right.
And a cross is just a 2-dimensional representation of a cube. And then we get to black cube of Saturn.
Oh,
We're going
have
deep.
we done this yet? Have we done the
No.
black cube of Saturn yet?
No, not yet.
So fun story, ladies and gentlemen. I really wanted a Saturn tattoo because I saw Saturn in a telescope once, and it just sparked this rabbit hole of like pondry, and it just was amazing. I recommend everybody to find a telescope, point it at Saturn, and just look at it. It's so cool. So I wanted a tattoo of it, and Nick was like, I was like, what?
No.
What? And yeah, I don't know. Enlighten
You
us.
cannot worship the almighty Kronos. He is a dead deity. He was defeated by our Lord and Savior. No, there's. I mean, this goes deep down into like the lowest parts of the conspiracy theory iceberg. But there is an idea that civilization has been around for much longer than we think, and that actually Saturn was our sun at one point, and then it got ousted basically as our sun about 60,000 years ago or something like that. It's a very deep rabbit hole that I don't have everything on, but there is a belief that there's still a sect of people out there who worship Saturn as the original sun of Earth.
Yeah, and so
what else did
lest
it
I
like
get-
a black hole?
What's that?
What else did it? Real quick, was it
What
like a
else?
black hole, or did like the sun walk up to Saturn and was like, "Get out
I
of
think
here"?
the sun walked up to Saturn and punked it. No, I think what happened. So apparently this is really, I'm very shaky on this, but apparently Earth, the Moon, and Mars came into the solar system when Saturn was already the sun, and something happened. It's very reminiscent to Kronos and Zeus story. So basically, the idea is that Kronos, which is representative of Saturn, was the old god, the god that was reigning over Earth forever. And then you have Zeus, who usurps him, which we refer to as Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is our greatest protector because Jupiter, the only reason that we on Earth exist is because Jupiter takes all of the meteors. If you look, there's these little GIF diagrams of all of the moons that Jupiter's created or accumulated, and there's hundreds of them. And it's just because Jupiter's gravitational pull keeps the meteors from hitting us.
No, I don't like this. Jupiter's building an army.
It might be building an army.
got-
I don't know. I like the
Jupiter.
protector angle. I might get that tattoo. I'm liking it. Well, and just to bring it back in a little bit, I'm gonna bring up a couple more cool factoids about the directions. One of the ones that I really enjoyed. Which one was it? It was. Hold on a second. I'm finding it. Oh no, where is it? Okay. Hold on. So I'll just share one. There's the Walpuri culture that corresponds the north to law, the west to language, south to ceremony, and east to skin. And country lies at the intersection of these directions at the center of the compass, which is here, which is totally different from some of the other directional associations, but interesting too. I mean, south to ceremony, there's got to be something going on with the different directions locally there.
I think it also, I mean, like I keep coming back to this center thing, and I feel like that's like the biggest part of it for me, because it reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. I feel like, you have the Wicked West of the East, you have the Wicked West of the North, you have the Wicked West of the South, and the Wicked Witch. Sorry, not Wicked West. All the witches of the directions, right? And Dorothy roams from her home. She roams from the center and finds herself in Oz, where she goes through all of these, perils and adventures and all of that stuff, only to sort of return back to center. So there is that element of like
grounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And the directionality being opportunity and also sort of unknown. Like the center is where you are here. to the north of you is this, to the south of you is this, and east and west are, these are the it almost reminds me of potentiality or opportunity, right?
Mhm.
What happens if you just, walk out your door and walk east, or, things like that. But yeah, it's that call to adventure. It's that recognition that once you step out of that center, you're in the sort of the adventure, you're in the unknown. And perhaps some of those directionalities do have characteristics that we gleaned when we stepped out of the center and brought it back with us.
Like boons.
Yeah,
Joseph
absolutely.
Campbell's
Right.
boons. Well, and I'm glad that you brought that idea of the center, because I found the little bit that I wanted to share. It was talking a little bit about the way we think, and how when it comes to orienting ourselves in the world, English speakers do have that ego center, that the center is where they are. So if you come to my city and ask for directions to my favorite ice cream place, my answer will involve turning left or right on certain streets. In this manner of seeing the world, I think of it as branching out away from me, which is the center. So things are to the left or the right of me, and I need to go forward or backwards, up or down. And these are called relative directions. But if you go to North Queensland, Australia, and ask somebody who speaks Gugu Yimithir, you won't hear words like left or right because they don't exist in the language. The four cardinal directions are north, east, south, and west. Speakers of many Aboriginal languages like this also describe locations and directions using cardinal directions, which do not rotate with them as they turn. So they would never say you're standing in front of the best ice cream shop in town. They'd say you're standing north of it. They wouldn't ask you to move a little to the right so they can walk through the door. They'd ask you to move a little to the east, which is really interesting. I could go on. There's like 4 more points about this.
I get a little shaky on this, but I think the Iroquois were very similar. The whole Confederacy, where it wasn't so much left or east west, but there was land markers tied in with their cardinal directions, where they basically had it was all oral tradition. So they had mental maps, but it would be like this tree at this location, that tree at that location. It would all be then to get between trees would be cardinal directions.
I love that. Well, and to illustrate this a little bit more, there's a linguist that explained speakers of this language have an internal compass that's imprinted from infancy. It's a hard word to say. Studies have found children as young as 2 were using these cardinal directions. In the same way, English children learn to use different tenses when they speak at about that age. So studies have shown that speakers of languages that rely on cardinal rather than relative directions to express location have extraordinary spatial memory and navigational skills. Regardless of visibility conditions or their location, indoors or outdoors, stationary or moving, they have a perfect sense of direction, the way some people in our culture have perfect pitch. There's no moment of calculation before they say there is a spider west of your foot. And there's many stories available of what to us seem like extraordinary feats of orientation, but are just par for the course for speakers of geographic languages. So there's a story of a speaker of Tetzel, Tzeltal. It's a dialect in southern Mexico. And the folks they were observing were blindfolded in a darkened house, and they were spun around over 20 times. While still blindfolded and dizzy, they didn't hesitate before pointing at the cardinal directions every time they were asked, which is kind of cool. And languages that primarily use cardinal directions to talk about space were found all over the world, from Polynesia to Mexico to Namibia to Bali. I think you mentioned the Iroquois. And it's still an open question about whether this convention affects a person's sense of identity or their worldview. So if a Gugu Yimithir speaker wants to direct your attention behind him, he'll point through himself as if he were thin air and his own existence were irrelevant. That's just like filtered through some linguist, but the linguist is quick to point out that that doesn't mean that the speaker doesn't understand the concept of something being behind them. And a language like this places the speaker in a physical matrix that's greater than themselves by default, in contrast to English, which places us at the center of an ever-revolving personal access.
Damn right, USA.
Oh yeah.
So have you ever looked through somebody, or like look through like someone's like someone asked me, hey Mike, where's the West Side Pavilion? Rest in peace. I don't even know the thing's becoming. And I'm like, oh, it's over there. All right. And I'm looking through my wall, I'm looking through people and anything like that. Right. Like I feel like if you can do that, that's the absolute space versus having to do all this math to orient yourself down certain streaks or things like that. Like sort of things become more relative versus the absolute.
Less efficient.
It's generalized. It's as the crow flies, right? So we're talking about something, and I think that there might be a distinction here too with the maybe the environments that have less electromagnetic interference allow humans that have lived there for a very long time to be more in tune with the electromagnetic field of the earth. Because you're talking about, Aboriginal people who have been in Australia for 6,000 years, something like that, maybe longer. I think it's like 20,000 years. I'm sure that the people in Mexico have been there for a very long time. And you're talking about a lot of very rural people. So I'm wondering if the lack of electromagnetic interference allows humans to hone that sense of north, south, east, and west.
This is what I'm arguing against, right? Like the mall is that way. I can point to the mall. I live in Los Angeles. My family has been here for millennia, before humans.
Yeah,
even
but what
existed.
direction is that? What direction?
Or if I spun you in a bunch of.
Oh, look at you, clever man! Look at you,
Just-
clever, trying to get. Honestly, this would be northeast.
Yeah, ish.
Ish.
It is northeast, and I can as a vector goes, I can probably point in that general direction. I have to do the street math, but I don't think electromagnetic disturbance. I think it might cause an initial disruption, but if you live in an area long enough and you've been on traveling long enough, then you can get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find the part where they talk about the 2-year-old, because I think that's.
So for Corey's statement, well, people who can see the sun and stars are familiar with the find direction by the sky, but I doubt the blindfolded stuff.
Yeah, he's calling bullshit.
But remember, like one premise of our thing was that through civilization we have lost this sense of being connected with Earth's magnetism. Earth's magnetism, that electromagnetic field is not visual at all. It's a sense. Just like smell is a sense, touch is a sense. All the other stuff. So like you don't necessarily need to see things to figure out directions if you're in tune with that sense.
I think you're right.
And the argument is that over time we have become blind to the sense. Just like someone who is blind can't see, someone who's deaf can't hear. We are blind to the magnetism that surrounds us. It just takes something to get that back in tune.
And you really would only need to feel the pull of true north. You wouldn't have to feel the other directions, because if you know the direction of true north, you know the other direction.
Yeah.
So
a
you
lot
would
of
only
mammals.
have to feel the North Pole.
Unless you're in the poles, in which case, what are you
Yes,
doing
then
there?
you're just
You're
running around in circles over.
Or
You're a
you're
human
Then
being.
you're
Get out of the
screwed.
cold. Why are you there? Go home. Get out of there. You're gonna die.
Corey says, "I need receipts." All right, we're gonna sponsor a trip for Corey to go to Australia so that he can interview the Aboriginal tribes for us.
Yeah.
There you go. Keep your receipts, sir.
Yes.
Well, no,
It's all
and
a write-off.
well, and
Yeah,
I was
that's
thinking, It's interesting that they talked about children as young as 2 using cardinal directions, because something I can't let go of is the idea that our brains, at least for our ears, which is really tethered to the vestibular system, if you think about it, part of why babies can learn any language is because their ears can pick up something like 400 different phenome types, which I understand from a linguistic perspective is like a characterization of sound. As you get older, I think by the time of 2, it's no longer 700. And as an adult, it's 40.
Yeah.
So what happens is as your brain develops, it is in this constant pruning process where if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't need it, you get rid of it. And so I think to Mike's point, yeah, we might be able to inherently have a sense of cardinal directions at a young age, but if it's not honed and reinforced with our language, it seems, right? Because it's got to be something with the vestibular system, and that's tethered to hearing, and that seems to be tethered to language and the way that things are characterized.
Well,
then
first of all,
you
it's just
lose
not
it.
necessary.
Well, yeah, and I'm thinking of that movie Arrival, where you learn this alien language and suddenly you can like see the future or something, right? Because it's just perception, and I think that's kind of groovy to think about.
It is groovy. But here's the dark side of that. So what is, as a dubious deduction, what happens if we don't filter out certain senses and everything around us? What is that called? Usually develops between the ages of 29 and 33.
Mm-hmm. Schizophrenia, synesthesia. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Oh, I've dived into the schizophrenia discussion. I can share what I've read.
Of course. The thing being here is that filtering process might be very important.
Yeah.
In order for us to make sense of reality. I wonder a lot of the times, because we obviously don't see UV, we don't experience a lot of reality.
Yeah.
If that becomes important for us to be conscious. Like if we had raw filters on everything, if we wouldn't have a conscious mind, but in order for us to filter it down to a language, which is a very rigorous set of rules of syntax and grammar and all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't do that, then we lose this thing called consciousness. And schizophrenics are just one kind of outlier branch into that world. And if certain people can tolerate more, can kind of maybe not tolerate is the right word, but can experience more of the total set of reality without having to make it to a subset of certain things, it can still be considered quote unquote sane, which is a subset of consciousness itself.
Yeah, it's like taking the filter off and basically being given raw data, just straight into the veins.
I wish I.
Oh yeah, give me that hot shot of data.
Yes.
So bad. Give it to me.
Well, yeah, no, I'm sad there was an article somewhere and it did talk about what you're talking about, Mike. And unfortunately, they did prove that without certain linguistic attributes, people were still able to have cognition. But I don't want to 100% say it refutes what you're saying, because it could have just been like a teeny tiny bit of it. But I see what you're saying for sure.
I'm stepping out on a ledge with this idea.
I like it. No, that's
is to be refuted.
Yeah, language builds structure, right? I mean, and I think what we're saying is that, Ayla, you had mentioned this sort of cosmic soup that we are at like 2 years old, where if you wanted to learn a language, you could probably learn 3 different languages in that time. I remember when I was 3, I knew all of the state capitals for no reason. My parents didn't teach me anything useful, but I knew all the state capitals by heart. And do I know them now? No, of course not, because my brain said I don't need that. But
state capitals.
But I think that through the process of language and then society and all of the things that come with life and experience, you start to, I guess you rigidize. You sort of structurize your reality more and more and more.
You become set in your ways.
You can become set in your ways. Absolutely. Yeah. And then that becomes its own little prison sometimes.
Well, it makes me
You
wonder
made
too
it sound cute.
about it sounds so adorable.
Your cute little prison.
Prison of my own construction.
I love it so much. Little rattle in the like when you shake the cell walls, it rattles like one of those little rattlers in your baby. But no, but it makes me wonder too about like ghosts and other like extra dimensional beings, right? Maybe when you're really little, you can see them, but it's not really prudent for you to see them as an adult. Like, was that? It's not going to help you putting your TPS report or something. It's just going to be there looking at you all weird like. So you prune that part of your senses off as you move forward from that very young primordial cosmic soup age into an adult.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait for the younger generation to discover Office Space after they've worked for, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like TikTok is going to have this like, whoa, where did this ancient movie come from?
I love that movie
relatable
so much. I'm telling you, when I feel like I'm going to get fired, I'm taking a trout into work. I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to gut it and I'm going to make some fish right in the kitchen.
Nice.
There we go. Sorry, apes can hit rocks against each other, but they don't craft spears and knives from that. The concepts of the noble savagery are overrated, in my opinion. I think that there's a fine line, right? So we're talking a little bit more about the I don't know. When you said that, I thought to myself, yeah, if I wanted to write a book, I wouldn't throw a manuscript in a room of, like 100 chimpanzees on typewriters, right? I'd want to be able to focus my thought and focus my intention into creating a book that actually has a message and a point. And that's the difference between a monkey hitting a rock and creating a spear. It's not to say that monkey will hit a rock and not create a spear, because it will. It'll create a spear and a knife, but it won't know what the application of what it just did was. So the ability for the spear or the knife to be created is still inside the chaos of 100 monkeys on typewriters, but we want the intentionality of being able to do it deliberately. Yeah, I get that.
That makes me, the dimensionality or the subspace of time. Over time, you get 100 monkeys making 10 spears, not learning the intentionality of it. But eventually, one of those apes that you're going to learn that thing can be used as a spear or a knife, whatever that means to the monkey, or not the monkey, the ape. And then the intentionality is spread throughout the species, and you get evolution. So, right now it's not, but you're like the time series is a little bit too small. Looking at time like this, but over hundreds of thousands of years, eventually they'll get there. I think certain apes or chimpanzees are far more vicious than like gorillas and other stuff. But I think they're starting to hit the Stone Age. I think they're starting to intentionally make tools out of stone.
Yes, and wood, particularly wood for scooping termites out of trees and stuff like that, and using stones to break open shells and things.
Yeah, I've hit the Hogwarts age. I finally made my first wand.
Did you whittle something?
Yeah.
You whittled something. Well, I want to go back to your point about schizophrenia, Mike, because I kind of went down that rabbit hole as well. Because if the vestibular system is really a process that is fundamental to our perception and our experience of the world, then there's a Harvard neuroscience researcher, Jill Bolte Taylor. I bring her up a lot, but she did a lot of research on schizophrenia, and hers really centers around this idea that your neurotypical person, so a person without schizophrenia, their concept of reality aligns with the concept of reality of other people, and they are successful in meeting their goals. That's kind of how she defines it. And with schizophrenia, she defines it as a conception of reality that doesn't align and doesn't support the person's goals. And so in reading about the vestibular system that there's some potential interest in its role in the development and expression of schizophrenia. So the mechanisms, they're still not understood, but that there are some abnormalities in the vestibular system that can be involved in the pathophysiology of schizophrenia. So it's like a physical sort of marker of it. And it plays a key role in maintaining balance and spatial orientation, as well as the integration of sensory information from multiple sources. Integration of sensory. So you were talking about like ghosts and stuff, or the pruning. So like, yeah, it could just be that they're tapped into something and the wires are crossed, and they're either picking up on something that most people can't pick up on, or they're misinterpreting something as something else.
Have you, that's all fine, wrong. Any sane person misinterprets one thing as something else at least once in their life.
Yeah,
But
of
then
course.
being that everybody's schizophrenic. But just to step on the break a little bit too, talking about that, have you discovered sort of like have you gone to like the cultural studies of schizophrenia?
Well, I
How
guess
Eastern cultures, how Eastern culture schizophrenics experience it versus Western culture?
no, that's really fascinating. I think for me, I was just thinking about it. There's this study that said for everybody that our brains, it, that like the way everyone experiences the world, it's like a hologram of the real world. Like our
Yeah,
brains,
hologram theory. Yeah,
but
our
not.
episode payment.
No, I know. I'm like not wanting to use that word. Oh, it's our brains hallucinate the real world. It's a really far out there thing. So I should probably like rein it in and do that research and talk about it more. But tell me about the Eastern Western, because yeah, like there's still so much to be discovered
What is
about this.
schizophrenia? What?
Huh?
What are we talking about schizophrenia for?
She's just interested. I'll run it down.
Okay.
I'll run it down really quick, and then we'll get back to directionality. So underlying this whole current conversation has been the general connotation of the word abnormality, which is somewhat negative.
I know. That's just what the thing was saying.
No worries. It's probably, like you said, it's from Harvard. So Western.
This one's not from Harvard. This was GPT chat.
Western-based research. Yeah, we get into generative adversary networks later, but the thing that we find is that schizophrenics in Eastern culture, the spirits or the things that talk to them are actually more helpful. They're actually encouraging versus ones here in the Western culture. And the theory is that it's because we demonize schizophrenia, whereas in Eastern cultures, they just see it as another thing. So there's no weight between that. So it's the feedback loop coming in. So imagine that filter being completely broken, right? You're breathing in all this raw information, and everybody around you is telling you that this is a bad thing. So how does that paint the voices in your head? They don't exist in space. They're in isolation. They don't exist in a vacuum. The people around you telling you that it's a bad thing actually makes those voices in your head a bad thing. And there's some research going on called I believe it's called Avatar research, Avatar theory, Avatar something, where they get they start to paint a positive light on the voices and try to help you, instead of saying that you kill John Lennon, or that you're a piece of shit, or whatever the person experiencing the phenomena is going through in Western culture. And I find that really fascinating, that it kind of makes sense where if you don't have a filter, then everything that you're experiencing, especially with people, because comes from such a young age all the way up, as we've been talking about how society and parents, friends, all that stuff can paint your reality, how that ends up painting the voices in your head. And that's the general
I absolutely
idea.
agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I do think that the presentation, can be a bit different because there's a lot of ways that it can present itself. But what I did think was interesting was that there was some research to suggest that sort of tinkering with the vestibular system and vestibular stimulation, it had the ability to dial up and dial down presentation of hallucinations and delusions, positive or negative. There was just this correlative effect, which again, to me, I just thought was interesting because that's typically about directions. And we're finding that it's just so much more central to like who we are and how we
Well, maybe
experience the world.
the better word might be orientation, because if the vestibular system is in charge of the sensory orientation, then it would make sense that maybe somebody who experiences schizophrenia has a imbalance in their vestibular system, which is giving them too much information in an inappropriate way. You know what I mean? Because
or
you
in
think
a
about
non-neurotypical way to not, add any.
Okay, I don't need to. I'm not gonna. I just said a word inappropriate. It's fine for me to say that. It's not. I'm not being judgmental. Okay.
No, you're right in the statistical sense, right? Like it's inappropriate because the majority of people experience
Right.
Stimuli from that system in one way. But it's just like we would say that the London cab driver experiences inappropriate stimulation.
Yeah.
From their frontal, from the prefrontal cortex, or from whatever fucking place in the brain for the vitriol system, whatever it is, too, so that they can make a whole mental map of London. Right? It's inappropriate because not everybody does it.
Yes, it's an inappropriation of the orientation.
Yeah, that's where we have to be very careful with our language, because our language sucks.
Yeah, no, I just meant to say
Down
that
with language. No,
a lot of manifestations of schizophrenia are within the auditory range. And so a lot of people hear voices, or they might hear something through the radio or the TV. And so perhaps the vestibular system is getting wires crossed in some way that might manifest the inner thoughts of the person as an audio sensation.
Yeah. And so,
what I wonder too is, like, have you ever been traveling down the wrong direction and figured out you've been traveling down the wrong direction? Like, damn, I gotta turn around.
Every time we go through Sacramento and we're trying to get the 5, we end up on the 99 every time.
I do enjoy Sacramento. Sacramento's a good city. I have no, there's no Sacramento slander here. But
it's fine.
It's just, there's some nice bridges, some nice buildings, all of that. LA's better, but what the hell was I talking about? Schizophrenia. Yeah, no, I lost it. It's done. Continue. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. I was just gonna point out that Nick, you brought up the word of orientation, and we can see how orientation can, throw us off or keep us sort of on a certain track. And I think it's interesting that ancient cultures for a long time have paid respect, to directions, to these sort of elementals that can ground a person. And so I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the whole show. I think that was the last little bit.
I got it back. I'm sorry.
Oh, good.
You brought it back. Thank you so much. I don't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, I was done.
Okay. Thank you. Because I don't feel bad about myself. But yeah, when you travel down the wrong direction, you have to turn around. It makes me wonder if the schizophrenic can build that muscle to turn around, where they hear something. If they can figure out if it's off or not, if they have that awareness, and if they could go backwards, so to say, like, oh, this is just all BS. This is some sort of intrusive thought or intrusive voice. Or is it that they recognize that and happens over and over and over and over so much that it beats down their will?
That seemed to be the story of John Nash, right? He was very well aware of his schizophrenia towards the end of his life, and still managed to be able to semi-function in a way that wasn't overtly representative of his mental illness. But he definitely said many times that he still experienced hallucination. He just trained himself to not regard it as intensely as he used to. But he definitely did experience it still. So.
But I mean, I don't think you'll ever be able to not experience it. It's just what you do after. It's like being bullied in high school or something, or being bullied as a kid. Once you get into that thing, you cannot experience it, right? Maybe you go fight back or do something different, but you still have to recognize that the experience, the phenomenology of it is actually happening. Then how you react to it is what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, that's all I got for tonight's show. There's lots of other cultures that have directional orientations in their mythology. But if this is fascinating to you, I encourage you to Google all that's out there. And we have lots of ideas for upcoming
Yeah, you're going to have
shows
to do
on
a
this
Bagua
topic.
episode.
Yeah, and the North Pole changing conspiracy question
Yes.
mark theory, and then the
Bullshit.
magnetic
You know,
implants.
I would be
That
down
sounds wild.
to do a whole show series on the best ways to organize your house with regards to feng shui. I'm all about that. I'd be down for that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I noticed a difference. One thing I'll tell you that I heard from a person that does it is that it's always good practice to have a body of water by your front door. So that could be like a fishbowl, that could be a little water fountain, but that invites like fluidity and it keeps sort of like an openness going, or like it reduces stagnation to have moving water or water that's like present. And for a while, I had a little pothos plant at our front door, and it was like in a little cup of water, and it was a good week. I'm not gonna lie, it was a really good week. Then I moved it, and it was followed by a shitty week. So I don't know, but in my experience, I might keep it up there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You should keep it there.
Yeah, I actually want to put a betta fish, so it's always moving. You know.
Just don't put two in there.
No, that's a very bad idea. Well, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you, Corey, for chatting with us. And one of the last comments here, it's not all just social construction. Viability is also based in reality. Yeah, I think, we definitely should do an episode on reality and perception, all this stuff about stuff not being real. Like, what? We should talk about that.
Yes.
And
then your reality becomes a social construction, which then becomes a viability, which then becomes social construction. It's all the way down.
God.
It just keeps on going.
Oh yeah.
That's so 2020s. We're living in the 2050s now, Nick. We're postmodern.
Oh, that's right.
You got to keep it. What are you doing so far back? So out of vogue.
I'm still stuck in hyper reality. I'm sorry.
No, I think we just have to fix our lighting, because Corey brought in another point. Lighting is important.
Yes.
There's definitely real world applications for feng shui. Yeah, I believe it. I like to be open and everything, but personally, I do believe that there's something to it. People have unlocked something, and
especially with lighting. You can check out our episode on light and color if you want to learn more about that. We have an episode there. Mike did that one.
That was a good one, Mike.
Light and sound. Sorry, light and sound. You can go check that out.
Card song. It was named after card song.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ayla, for bringing up this episode. It was a fun one. And thanks, Corey, for chatting with us. We always appreciate you. And hopefully we see you for Sunday. We're going to be doing The Last of Us, which will be a fun episode. Then next Friday is going to be Mike's follow-up to the Psychotech episode that we did a couple episodes ago.
We're getting into Wartech. So
yes.
That's going to be
the other application of Psychotech.
I'm going to lose so many friends after that episode. I'm gonna go from 0
Then you
to
start
negative
goat
1.
style.
Yeah,
Wow,
no
all
idea.
right.
Uh-oh.
Sounds good. And then the Friday after that, my episode is going to be about forbidden fruit. So you can
Ooh.
anticipate that at your leisure. But thank you, Ayla, and thank you all of you out there. We really appreciate it. Again, shout out to Corey. We really appreciate you chatting with us tonight. And if you want to go check out what we do on other podcasts, you can go check out the network of podcasts that we are a part of at Thinkering Talks on Facebook. But we have a podcast every day of the week, basically starting on Tuesdays with Keelan at If Numbers Could Talk. Then we have Wednesdays and Sundays at Screen Time Continuum. Thursdays are Twitch with Dijon at Strawberries and Coffee, and also Big Mike at King_of_Ilion. Then we have Friday nights here at Exofathom, Saturday mornings with This Married Moment, and then Sunday nights with Screen Time Continuum. So something for every day of the week except for Mondays, because nobody likes Mondays. So yeah, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. Until next time, Cosmonauts, stay out there, and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Toodles. I'm
Toodle
going to say it
noodles.
really angry every single time. Fucking toodles.
Fucking North, South, East, West, toodles.